welcome back to This Is Whole Life. And today we have two people on the phone. We have Jeff and Ken. Jeff is about to do some traveling. Ken is actually doing some traveling while we're doing the podcast this week. So through the miracle of technology, here we are and about to take off as we continue with our third installment of our Love Is series. And this past week, we kind of decided that it wasn't boastful. But before we get too far in, we can remember at the end of last week's episode, we asked the question, what is the difference between confidence and arrogance? And we wanted to get that out there before this week's message and to see what you had to say about it. And we did get I forgot. I missed church last week, which you probably didn't notice, but I was unavailable for the autographed 8x10s that Ken promised y'all from yours truly. And I have family in town this week, so I won't be here this week either. So, if you came to church just for that last week, I apologize. And if we're planning on coming this week for it, more apologies. But maybe next week we can come up with something fun because, we're just going to, maybe a hat or, we still have some tokens left, don't we, Ken?
Yeah, we have some hats left, roll up, but I still like the glossy if she's the best. So we gotta figure that out.
I'll get working on that next week and see if we can pull off an 8x, maybe just one, because it's getting to that season in Florida where it's, the heat isn't quite so oppressive. I don't know if you're like me, you've got a little fire pit in your backyard and you just need something that burns real hot, real fast for a short period of time to get the fire going. This might be just a thing, Ken. Good thinking.
I don't think so. I think that's something people want to put over top of their fireplace. Frame.
Oh, man. See, surely.
I think it would be foolish to do anything otherwise.
Surely you jest. But anyway, our response came to the question from Ellie McGray, who is a faithful listener and a big fan of mine because she kind of has to be. She gave us this definition to our question. The difference between confidence and arrogance is that confidence is a good, positive self-esteem that you keep to yourself, and arrogance is telling everyone you know how great you are all the time without ceasing. I particularly like that last part, without ceasing. And so I was like, that's a pretty good definition. And it kind of worked into where Ken started off with the flexing. And guys, if you missed the message this week, please go back and listen, because if you only missed the flexing part of the analogy that he brought to the message early on, you really are missing out because it was pretty good. And I look forward to the day when maybe Ken and I hit the gym together with those protein shakes he talked about, and maybe just see if we can get ripped together. That might be fun. And then of course the humble brag, the modest or self-deprecating statement with purpose to draw attention to something you're proud of. And we also talked about the blessed boast of, using God to point out how great things are for you, for things that he's done for you. And I kind of paraphrased one of his opening statements, said when it makes another person feel less than and pushes ourselves up, that we're not being, where it starts with that we're not being loving. And, hold on. We got hold and accept. Hold on. We got Ken back. We lost Ken. Oh, Ken, you're back?
Here I am.
Okay, now let's see, guys, this is the kind of thing that the miracle of technology does work out eventually. Jeff, are you back?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, we're back. Okay, so we lost Ken for a moment. These are the hazards of driving while podcasting. And
right.
So... But it said, that when it makes another person feel less than and pushes ourselves up, that's really where we're not being loving. But as I was thinking about what that part of what you said, Ken, it seems like it can be pretty easy to misinterpret someone's intentions when it comes to being maybe genuinely excited, or maybe they're feeling blessed and really feeling invigorated by God's leading in something specific in their lives. And as a community, even just within our walls at WholeLife Church, how do we hold each other comfortable without taking the wind out of each other's sails when maybe there are good things and maybe we don't know how to communicate them so well, or it's just misinterpreted? Is there a good way to approach someone that you think maybe you've just misinterpreted, or is it really our business to do that?
I think what you're asking is, do we need to set up a special committee to make sure that nobody's too boastful, right?
Yeah, something like that, right? I mean, if you feel like someone's going too far.
Yeah. No, I think that probably what we need to be doing is paying more attention to ourselves and worrying a little less about others. I think that we've all been around somebody who is constantly boasting about their stuff, and it becomes a little bit uncomfortable after a while just because it's so constant, so steady. And I think that if you're in a relationship with that person, a friendship, I think it's an appropriate thing to have a conversation about that in a loving, productive manner that isn't that's trying to avoid judgment, but to explain how that particular behavior is making you feel and how it's coming across. But I think a lot of times we want to set up ourselves as some sort of moral police force when that's not particularly part of our job description.
Mm.
I do think that's a great question, actually, within a community, because Ken spoke about it, and it's something that we become aware of, and here, this is what love is, but it's very difficult to try to figure out, especially if you have a blind spot to your own arrogance or to your own boastfulness. And then if you have that blind spot, where does that play out in the community where you actually are called into accountability for that? I mean, that's a very good question. So I do think that what we need to realize is that the community has different areas where it shows vulnerability. And this is a big one right here. This is where the community is vulnerable. And so it's really important that we have areas where in the community or places or spots where, whether it's group life, smaller groups, more intimate type groups, where these kind of hard conversations can actually take place. Ken's right. It's not our responsibility to just go up to anybody and say, "Hey, you're being boastful." But in a community that has arenas for intimate and crucial type conversations, that's a very valuable piece that a lot of communities don't always have. So good call. Good question.
I think we can all admit to the fact that we've all been boastful to the point of even arrogance at times in our lives. It's just something that happens, and it's a part of human nature, but that there can be some confusion in that. And so it's just, it seems hard to really say with any degree of certainty. Just for me, I just feel like it's hard to pin that on someone and tell them, yeah, you're being boastful. And I don't know how you would approach that without really knowing for sure. I mean, sometimes it's maybe a little more obvious than others, but that just seems very difficult.
Randy, I think it's a little bit of reading the room. Generally, when you're boasting, it's pushing other people's heads under the water so you can push your head up.
That's true. Yep.
Whereas when you're happy about something happening for you, when you're excited about that, it's not that you're trying to make somebody else feel inferior because of what good thing happened to you. And there's times though that if you just got a job promotion and you're excited about it, it might not be the time to talk about your excitement with your colleague that was passed over for the job promotion, right? So it's knowing the room. It's reading hey, nothing wrong with being excited that you got a promotion. There is something wrong with it if it's making another person feel less than.
Yeah, that's true.
By the way that you're going about doing that. And so that's, I think, the part that we have to really consider. We should be excited. We should be joyful. And I'd like to think that when my friends have good things happening for them and those good things aren't happening for me, that I'm going to be able to find it in myself to be happy with them and to be joyful with them, and not to say, "Oh, well, look at you making me feel bad because of something good that happened to you." At the same time, I want to be the kind of friend that pays attention to what's happening with my friends and knows the right time to share and the right time to not share, depending on what's happening. And so I think, Jeff, you've probably seen this happen a lot when you're dealing with young adults, and couple is trying to have children, and it's just not working. And then another couple becomes pregnant, and there's that awkwardness in that relationship. That the one couple is extremely excited that they're going to be having a child. The other one, you can palpably feel the pain as they're watching. They're happy for their friends, but they're also hurting. And so that's what I think I'm trying to say when it comes to boasting. I think we need to just be aware of what's happening around us, and that's the love that we're talking about. Is being aware of how you're making other people feel by how you're behaving and what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's huge, because especially in a community where you have so many different levels of success, and then there's promotions and those different pieces. To have compassion, even though you're excited for any accomplishment that you might have, to have compassion over those relationships that are already there. And there's some sadness and some, even like you said, if you got a promotion, or if you got pregnant and that your friend's been struggling with that. I mean, those are all very sensitive things, not just being able to understand that my boasting or my pride or my celebration at this point is going to come in the face of all of that. I think it's being able to be sensitive in that regard too. That's good.
I had a teacher that I knew that told me this teacher there were a lot of well-off people, and they were working with younger children, I think maybe kindergarten age. And what was interesting to me is they said that they had one child in that classroom that did not come from a background that would provide a lot of financial stability. And at the beginning of every school year, this child would listen to all the wonderful things that happened over the summer for the other kids in that class. And then this kid would make stories up about the places they've been and the things they've seen, because they're so aware of what they didn't, what they weren't getting, and what wasn't happening for them. And I think that's one of the things that we as adults need to be aware of. Again, there's nothing wrong with doing wonderful things for our kids over the summer or Christmas, but I think again it's just being aware of those that may be out on the margins and may not have the same opportunities, and just training our children. And I'll tell you, that's one of the things actually that's really impressed me about WholeLife Church. And it's something I've heard from people at WholeLife Church, is that when you go to WholeLife Church, that there's just a sense of commonality no matter what your position in life. We've obviously got people who are incredibly successful financially, personally, across the board. But one of the things that I love about WholeLife is that when we come together to worship, I think that I know when I walked in, I could not point out who was who. And I've been in other churches where it's very obvious who is who. And so I really appreciate that about WholeLife, that there is I believe, a real commitment to equality and to caring about each other and caring about each other's feelings, and making sure that we don't think that just because I'm the senior pastor of the church that I'm better than the associate pastors or anybody else, that I'm an equal with everybody else. And that's what I think I really appreciate, and I want to make sure that we always keep that going, because that's so important.
I like that, because there's so many times when it feels like, the world around us, it's a us versus them. It's the rich versus the poor, the successful versus the not so successful, and all the little compartments from social media on down that we can put ourselves in to compare and contrast. But like you said, when we're worshiping together, when we're playing together, maybe a gym night, when we're doing lake day, or, we're involved, or we're just involved in each other's lives outside of church, you don't get that feeling that someone else is thinking like you don't fit in this box because our tax bracket is different, or our zip code is different, or you're a pastor and I'm a lay person, and you're biblically superior and somehow you don't matter, or any of the things that we can get trapped into. And then on the other side, to just be so compassionate to think that in my joy or in my success, like you said, read the room and kind of temper that for where you are and who you're with. And obviously we may not know everyone's situation, but maybe it's just best to be a little bit tempered unless you're only in a group of people you absolutely know will just relish in your joy and it won't bring anybody down. I think that's good advice. So
yeah,
go ahead.
There was an instance years and years and years ago with a physician who came and said, I have never been in a church. This is to Ken's remark. I've never been in a church where I felt like I was finally, and he was he was actually the chief physician at the hospital. He said, I've never been in a church where I finally felt like I didn't have to, because we've done away, we've tried to do away with titles. We don't, if you're a doctor, congratulations for getting your doctorate and congratulations getting your degrees and so forth. But degrees do not, create healthy equality sometimes within relationships. And so we tried to minimize your titles, so to speak. And it's just, we'd kind of go on first name basis. And he came to us and said, man, could you guys keep this up? Because I finally feel like I can actually have real relationships here with the church. And I think it's important. It's huge.
Isn't it? Because instead of treating somebody like the job that they are, we treat them as the human being that God created them as.
Yeah.
You are a person outside of your title, outside of who you are. And that's, I think, such a Christian concept. If we, unfortunately, not well practiced often, but it's a Christian concept. I mean, Jesus speaking says, "Don't let anybody call you rabbi. Don't let anybody."
Yeah.
Jesus really was big on people not making too much of themselves, because the truth of the matter is that anything good I accomplish in life is because I've been blessed by God in some way, and so. Really, then everything good, everything wonderful, it's just a gift from God. And so I need to go ahead and recognize that, be grateful for it, and at the same time, make sure that I don't think that the gifts that I've been given in some way make me superior. I actually believe when God gives gifts, it's because he gives them believing that a person can actually use them in a positive way to make the world a better place. And that's what the purpose of these gifts are.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that analogy, Jeff, because in most cases, you would assume the story you were just telling wouldn't be true to that extent of it being the doctor, because usually we want to celebrate and we want to hold that person up to a higher pedestal, when in reality, it's like, I just want to be this. I'm the same as everyone else. What I do doesn't define me, and it shouldn't define, for you, it shouldn't define me either. And I think that's a really good reminder that we all just want to be seen and felt and understood as who we are.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that a lot. Well, I had a question because a couple of the verses you used this week, Ken, 1 Corinthians 1:31, and these are from the New Living Translation, said, "Therefore, as the scriptures say, if you want to boast, boast only about the Lord." And then I was like, well, does God need us or want us to boast for him? I mean, it doesn't seem like that would be something so great. And what would we boast about? And then in Jeremiah 9:24, it kind of answers the question. But those who wish to boast should boast in this alone, that they truly know me and understand that I am the Lord who demonstrates unfailing love and who brings justice and righteousness to the earth, and that I delight in these things. I, the Lord, have spoken. But those who wish to boast, that just seemed kind of weird to me. Would it be better if we just avoided boasting in general, even if it's about God, so we don't even put ourselves in that place to maybe get good at it and then accidentally go, oh, I guess I'm boasting about me now. I'm kind of forgetting about the God part of this.
Well, yeah, but let me say this. So I have discovered the best gelato place in maybe in the United States.
Ooh, Ken, tell me more.
Yeah, it's and I need to Jeff can it's off of what, Jeff, do you remember what road that's off of, the gelato place I'm talking about? Because we've talked about this.
Yeah, that's right off of 436. It's 436 in Douglas there.
Oh, it's close to us.
Phenomenal. So if you've ever traveled to Italy, the gelato in Italy is like nothing I've ever experienced before until I found this place. And the guy who runs it is Italian, and he imported all of his equipment from Italy, and he gets all his ingredients from Italy. So if you want like true Italian gelato, that's where you want to go.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
He's from Venice.
I mean, it's really good. And I know that everybody's like, okay, so this must be some sort of paid advertisement. What does this have to do with boasting? But let me go ahead and tell you something, though. When you find something that you really like, you love to share it with other people, right?
Yep.
And so for me, I love telling people about this guy because I do not want him to go out of business. I want him to stay in business. It's a little selfish, I'm not going to lie.
Don't take Ken's gelato, please.
Yeah. This place has got to stay in business. I love it. And so that's what God's trying to say is like, if I'm so good to you, wouldn't you want to tell other people so they can experience it? I recommend the gelato place to my friends because I'm not at all afraid that they're going to have it. If you go, it's just awesome. It's such good gelato. And I want you to experience it because I think it's delicious. And I think it's going to make your life better. And like, why don't we feel that? That's what I want. When I experience God, I want other people to have that experience because I know how good God has been to me. I know what a difference he makes in my life. And so if I'm going to boast, I want to boast about God because I know that if you can experience God in his fullness and experience what I'm experiencing, your life is going to be better. And so I believe that's really what Paul is trying to say in that text that we're talking about. Is if you want to boast about something, boast about God who's going to make people's lives better. Boast about what he's done for you and how your life is changed and how you are a better person because of what God has done in your life.
I like that. And because I understand Ken's love of ice cream and gelato, and Ken actually tried to take me to this place, but he was closed the day we went.
It is a good place.
He's open in the evenings, not at lunchtime, which is when we tried to go.
That's
but
right.
We're going to get there, okay?
We're going to get there. And you know what? Maybe we should do a podcast meetup at the gelato place to make sure it doesn't go out of business.
Nothing wrong with that. The pizza place right next door is actually not bad either.
All right. Now, come on.
We're promoting.
Yeah. Come on. Now we're doing dinner and dessert. Okay, guys. So, we're going to have to pick a date upcoming here, and we're going to pick a date, and we're going to go for pizza and gelato because it's next door to each other. It's literally park once, eat twice, and waddle back to your car. That's what we're going to do.
At some point, Randy, I think this podcast may have a spinoff of ice cream places or something because we talk about ice cream an awful lot.
We do.
In this podcast. I'm just saying. Spinoff ice cream shops of Greater
Central
Orlando.
Florida. That's right. That's perfect. Well, one of the things about this message that I really, really enjoyed, and we can't talk about it because it's not going to be the same. But what I want you to do is go to WholeLife.Church and watch last week's message if you missed it. Ken put on the stage a framed picture that was absolutely beautiful of you and Rochelle, and he used it as an illustration, and the way he did it was perfect. And so just trying to explain it and without seeing the picture, it's just not going to make the same impact. So if you missed the message, please go back and check out that reference. It's towards the end of the message, but if you missed the message, check it out in whole. It was very, very good, and it was very insightful, and using that as that reference point really, really kind of brought everything together. So before we run out of time, let's start grabbing our questions from the Q&A because we had a ton of questions this week, and let's jump into them. Paul Wakaiva said, does it seem like some of the apostles in the Bible came across as a little teeny bit boastful? I like that. A little teeny bit boastful. What do you think?
Oh, I mean, is there any doubt that Paul comes across that way? I mean, definitely. And here Paul is talking about not being boastful, right?
It shows we've all got a little work to do, right?
And then Peter bragging about how he's not going to betray Jesus, and then he goes and does it. And yeah, I think that we get some of that. I also think that it's easy to read into a different culture that we're not familiar with, things that may or may not really be there. And I think that's one of the things we have to do with Paul. When we read his writings, we have to use a little bit of discernment. We have to understand a little bit of the culture. And then I think you have to read it in context. Sometimes Paul is being very facetious in what he's saying. So anyway, but yeah, do they come across that? Yeah, I think they do.
And then
do I think that they are? I don't necessarily know that. I don't know whether Paul struggled with that issue or not, but it sure seems like he might have.
Yeah, I do think it's a different culture too. I'm in different culture. You're even in a different culture, even in the United States, when you're talking with children, right? Because I do think there's a side to this that is probably not seen the same way in the settings that they are in. So it's what seems to be boastful, and even now, I think now I look at sports today as opposed to sports when I was a kid, and my dad would point it out to me, in terms of and seeing professional sports now, he says they're all self-promotional and arrogant, and because the culture has shifted a little bit in terms of how we promote ourselves or boast about ourselves. So
yeah, back in the day, it was always act like you've been here before, right? That's what the coach would tell the players when they were too outlandish, and now it's celebrated. So definitely a difference in time, even in just that short period.
Right.
Retha Nellis, and I think we answered your question already, Retha. She said, didn't God say to be humble? So why do we have to boast? And I think we just answered that question just before we started into the Q&A. And so let's move on to the next one. Trifina asked, there are a lot of kinds of boasting. How to keep track of them all and not exhibit them? And that was from Zoe Brown. Sorry. How do we keep track of the different kinds of boasting? Or is it situational that we find ourselves in boasting? Or is there really different kinds that we have to watch out for to make sure and, to keep tabs on ourselves?
I think if we're worried about that, one of the good things we can do is find a person that loves us and that we love and ask them to to keep us accountable.
There you go.
I think that's one of probably the best ways to do it. Because I think Jeff said it a little earlier that we all have these blind spots. We don't really realize how we're coming across or what we're saying, or sometimes we just don't realize what we're really doing. We don't really stop to think about it. So I think that if we truly care about this, if this is a concern for us, that one of the things that we can do is find a person in our life that we trust to hold us accountable to how we're behaving.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a good one. This is from Trifina. The last one I said was this is actually from Trifina. The last one was from Zoe. Trifina asked, how do we help someone who is arrogant but does not know or believe that they are? Or is that not our job?
I think I answered this one during the Q&A. So, Jeff, I'm going to let you go ahead and give a better answer.
Was this a double down? Okay.
Yeah. That again, this is, do you have that right? First of all, I mean, are you in a setting where this is appropriate? Do you have a relationship with this person that can handle a conversation like that? Those are all questions, because if you're trying to be compassionate with someone and you're actually, because a lot of times this comes across wrong.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If you don't have the right relationship, usually they'll become defensive if the context is wrong. But if you're genuinely caring for somebody that you believe to be, boastful in a wrong way or so, I think it's damaging sometimes, even what parents do to their children. When their children are genuinely excited about something that they've done or accomplished, and then the parent would come across as, shutting them down or shutting their joy down for being boastful. And I think that's a wrong context. If the person, again, it's always going to be one person's idea of what it is. And so to be honest with you, I think you need to be extremely careful. I think you should wait for an opportunity for that person to ask you and say, hey, did that come across wrong? Or how did you interpret that? I think those are times you can step in and speak into somebody's life. But boy, I'll tell you, it's a really difficult time to think that you can speak into somebody's life if you have no, real previous relationship with them. I think it's a wrong move. That's just me personally.
No, I think you're right, and I think it's also glass houses. As long as maybe this isn't your thing, but we all have something, and it's pretty easy for someone to feel like, man, why are you throwing rocks at me? I see your stuff just like you see my stuff, and you know, and that makes it hard. It's hard to speak into that, like you said, unless someone opens the door for you, like, oh, maybe that didn't sound right. What do you think?
Yeah, and most of the time you're going to get a defensive response.
That's probably
most
true.
of the time.
Yeah.
So my guess would be, if you genuinely care, that's where you have to check your own heart first. If you genuinely care for that person, I would probably wait for that opportunity.
Yeah, it's probably good advice. All right, our last one was from Lynn Jerice. She said, what about the people that want no notoriety for anything? They choose to stay behind the scenes. They don't want credit for anything. I feel that when God wants to elevate someone, it's going to be noticeable without the boasting. Is that something that we just see? Is there something that we see in them differently when God chooses to do that in their lives?
I think that goes to the Bible text that we use that talks about that God lifts up the humble in due time.
Yeah.
And so I think that the important point is being made in that question. And that is that if God needs us to be seen, he'll make sure we're seen. Otherwise, probably one of the things that we can work on is just allowing God to be our hype man rather than thinking we need to be our own hype man.
Yeah, it's probably not as much fun or as often as it would be if we did it, right?
Yeah,
right.
I think God noticed too that I think that one of the things that we often see in so many lives is that when we really think we're getting somewhere and we're something special, those are the times where we often make some pretty big mistakes. In our life.
Absolutely.
So,
all right. Well, The last comment we had was from Jahimi, who said, if there's anything to boast about, it's to boast about Christ. And so there you go. He had it right on. So this week, he did nail it. This week, we didn't have any whole life reflections, but that just opens the door to, did we miss anything? Was there anything that after the message you've thought about more in depth and you'd want to let us know what that is? You can always reach out to us, 407-965-1607 by text or voicemail and remain anonymous in that method. Or you can email podcast@wholelife.church, and we would love to read or share your comments on the next podcast. And our final thoughts are from the closing to Ken's message, and this was from first service. I don't know if you duplicated it at second, but he said, I want you to know that you don't have to be perfect at love to try to practice it. We all have these little issues that we deal with in our life that we work on. We pray and turn them over to God and say, I know this is an issue, and I give you permission to work in it in your way and in your time, and he will. That's pretty reassuring when you stop and think about all the things that we, not just love, but all the things we really should be just on a daily basis giving over to God. And at the end, in his time, in his way, and he will. That really felt good to finish this message with, to just a good reminder that we all probably should just be reminded of on a fairly regular basis. All right, next week we are in week 4. What are we doing next week, Ken? What are we looking at?
Well, let's not be rude, okay? That's
whatever.
That's the bottom line. Exactly. So there you go. So we're going to be talking, and it's actually going to be a fun one because it different translations put it different ways. But basically, the idea is that love knows how to properly behave.
Mm. So does this mean I have to quit hanging up on Jeff when he calls in and he doesn't come to the studio?
If you're doing it on purpose, you probably ought to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
there
so
we go.
So it's a matter of heart then. Oh man.
Yeah. Most things are.
Most things are. All right. Well, I appreciate both of you. I know there's a ton going on today for both of you, and to join us here, even by phone, and thank you all that are listening for giving us a little grace with the connection issues. And this is how we roll. We make sure that each week we get to dive in and dig a little deeper. And of course, we always would love to hear your comments. So again, make sure that if you have something to say, swipe up in today's show notes and all the contact information is there, and let us know what you're thinking. So that's going to do it for this week. Don't forget to, if you missed the message, you can watch it online at WholeLife.church. You can catch it on anywhere you listen to podcasts with Speaking of Grace. And we'll be back next Wednesday, and we'll try not to be rude about it, right?
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you, Randy. We appreciate you too.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Have a great day. And thanks for listening, guys. Have a great week.